Welcome to the Holy Post. A slate of new articles analyzes Pope Francis through America's progressive conservative polarization. But are they confusing political categories with theological ones? Surprising data shows that Gen Z is returning to religion and belief in an afterlife is on the rise. But what's the explanation? Are young people returning to the church to rebel against their secular parents? Then former Ohio Governor John Kasich believes America is on the cusp of a spiritual revival, and his new book, Heaven Help Us, explores how religious institutions are leading the way. He talks to me about how God used tragedy to awaken his own faith, and why he thinks this present era of greed and cowardice will pass. Also this week, a bunny, a Boeing, and a Bible illustration. As always, HOLYPOST Media has a lot going on, including 2 upcoming live events. First, this Saturday, May 3rd, I'll be in Detroit, Michigan with journalist Tim Alberta to talk about how Christians, both MAGA and anti-MAGA Christians, are responding to the new Trump administration. And then on May 16th, Caitlin will be talking to Duke Kwon at a HOLYPOST event in Northern Virginia near Washington, D.C. Tickets for both of these events are now available at holypost.com/event. These gatherings aren't just a chance to meet me and Caitlin or some of our guests, but an opportunity to meet other Holy Posters in your city. So be sure to get your tickets and connect with the larger Holy Post community near you. Of course, we also have loads of other new content every week for Holy Post Plus subscribers. And this week, that includes a free chapter from John Kasich's new book, Heaven Help Us. So head over to holypost.com and learn how you can get access to all that we're making and support our work of creating faithful, orthodox, pro-neighbor Christian content. Here is episode 667.
Hey there, welcome to the Holy Post. I'm Phil Vischer. This is the Holy Post. It's a podcast coming to you live from Wheaton, Illinois, downtown Wheaton. If you know downtown Wheaton, it's right near where they put up the big tent for dining out in the summertime. And as we are recording, the tent is going up. The tent is going up. It's like seeing the daffodils pop, emerge from the ground. It's the sign of spring.
It's the COVID tent, though. That tent did not exist before COVID.
You don't have to call it the COVID tent. Yes, it was the COVID tent.
Beautiful thing.
Yeah, but we liked it so much.
Bringing good out of evil.
We brought good out of evil.
It was worth 1 million deaths.
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Skye.
Wow, those are not the same thing.
It's time for the theme song.
What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. Skye and Phil and the Holy Post.
And sometimes Caitlin.
The Holy Post is sponsored by BetterHelp. We are living in crazy times, and that can be hard on your mental health. Plus, relationship stress, parenting, marriage, and work stress, it all adds up. Well, don't try to handle all this on your own. You can get help from trained professionals. But the economy and tariffs and the price of eggs, adding therapy onto all that feels like a huge investment, and the cost of traditional in-person therapy can be huge, costing anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. Online therapy with BetterHelp can save you, on average, up to 50% for each session. BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served more than 5 million people around the world. It's easy, too. You can join a session with the click of a button to help fit therapy into your busy life. And you can switch therapists at any time. You can do better than just survive these crazy times. Your well-being is worth it. Visit BetterHelp.com/HolyPost today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/HolyPost. Today's episode is sponsored by Sunday's Food for Dogs. We love our dog. Her name is Kina. We love to give her belly rubs, and she loves to patrol our backyard to make sure no squirrels break into our house to steal our valuables. We also love to give her Sunday's Food for Dogs. It's fresh, healthy dog food that's easy to store and serve. Most dog food is one or the other, either fresh and healthy or easy to store and serve. Because Sunday's is air dried, it doesn't require refrigeration or prep. It comes comes right to our door so we never run out. And it's healthy food. Human-grade ingredients, 90% meat, 10% superfoods, 0% anything else. Folks who've switched their dogs to Sundays notice health improvements like softer fur, fresher breath, and more energy. Kina loves Sundays food for dogs, and we love that it keeps her healthy and strong so she can keep the squirrels from taking our stuff. Give it a try. Right now, you can get 40% off your first order of Sundays. Go to sundaysfordogs.com/holypost or use code HOLYPOST at checkout for 40% off your first order. I am, by the way, here with Caitlin Chess.
Hi.
And Skye Jutani.
Hi.
Mr. Rain on your parade.
I just,
Seriously.
Yeah. Did I mention how many people died so we could have a tent?
they're not directly correlated. It's not like...
Exactly.
Yeah, but I do think of that every time I enjoy a pizza pie underneath that tent.
Really?
Every time? That explains a lot about you.
Oh, man. Maybe if you didn't wear black, things would go better.
But look
Maybe
at you.
if you got
You're
some
I know, but I'm
therapy.
cheerful. I'm cheerful. I'm not thinking about death while I'm eating a pie.
I'm not either.
Yeah, I think we should work on that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right.
But don't you pray, before you eat?
Yes.
Bless this food to our health. That
and
kind
the
of stuff.
people
So-
that died so I could be eating in the location I'm eating?
Yeah,
No, I do not. And I don't think our audience does either. Audience?
I've never done that.
You're with me on this, right? Audience? Oh, boy. Animal news.
Yay.
Animal news, odd animal news. A United Airlines flight experienced an engine fire shortly after takeoff from Denver Airport that was apparently caused by a rare rabbit strike.
Sorry, I'm having
Wait,
Monty Python
what?
images.
The audio recordings show the
Was
flight.
this on Easter by chance?
I don't think it may be
Oh my
Easter related.
gosh.
It may be Easter related. Audio recordings show the flight crew asking that the plane be inspected for an engine fire and being told afterwards, this is after they returned, that it was a rabbit that apparently got sucked into an engine. Rabbit through the number 2, that'll do it, the pilot responded. Rabbit through the number 2. Wildlife strikes are fairly common, with the FAA reporting more than 20,000 in the United States just last year.
It's mostly birds, isn't it?
The vast majority are birds. Do you know why, Caitlin? Because they fly.
Birds are in the air.
Because they fly.
Mm-hmm.
So what this article does not say is how does a rabbit get in a jet engine?
Oh, that's not hard.
That seems like the big
What do you
question.
mean it's not
It's
hard?
not when those jets are when they start the thrust.
Yeah?
Like it sucks massive amounts of air from all around the intake. So if there's a
But
rabbit
doesn't-
on the ground,
No.
oh yeah,
Really?
oh
Think it
absolutely.
would suck a rabbit off the ground?
It'll suck a man off the ground. That's happened before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in Indiana Jones, yeah.
No, that was a propeller. It just chopped them up. But no,
Game Night, the movie Game Night. That happens in Game Night.
I don't remember.
One of the villains.
got sucked into a jet engine.
Yeah, and I forget her name. Have you seen that movie? Hilarious, absolutely hilarious. It's Jason Bateman,
yeah.
And what's her name? Oh man, somebody look it up. Mike, look it up. I want to know her
Jennifer
name.
Aniston?
No, it looks like her, but it's not her. It's Mike.
I'm working on it.
It's
The cast. Rachel McAdams.
Rachel McAdams.
Isn't
Yes.
she married to
They
Daniel
don't
Craig?
look alike.
So, I don't know. Mike, is she married to Daniel Craig?
Hang on.
Mike.
No, she isn't. No, she isn't.
I don't
That's
think
someone
she
else.
is.
She's not.
She's
No,
not. That's
she's
someone
not.
else.
I don't think
That's
she
someone
is. Anyway, Rachel.
She was in Doctor Strange.
A guy is holding a gun. A bad guy's holding a gun on Rachel McAdams right outside in front of a private jet, like a business jet.
Uh-huh.
And they're revving up the engine, and he's holding
I've
the
seen
gun
this.
on Rachel Adams. And right as he's about to shoot her, he gets sucked into the engine. Whoop! And Rachel Adams says, "Yay!" And then says, "Oh, he died." It's very funny. It's such a funny movie. It's a hilarious movie. Anyway,
Rachel Weisz. Is who
Yeah,
Daniel Craig
it's a
is
different
married.
Rachel.
Rachel Weisz. That's a whole different Rachel.
Sorry, I got my Rachel.
But it
This
is. You were
wow.
right about the first name.
Wow.
Yeah, I was close.
You
See,
were-
I know my celebrity couples.
You were right
Yeah,
about
clearly.
the first name. So you think the rabbit was just sitting on the ground minding its own business, like it wasn't jumping 10 feet in the air.
I doubt it.
As the plane was taxiing.
No, I think the poor guy just
Okay.
got inhaled.
Huh. So then, like anything could get, like if a bag was left there.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you know that, Caitlin?
You know,
No.
when there's a video on YouTube, you can see this, when they are developing new jet engines.
Yeah, they put rabbits in front of them?
No, they
To see how much they suck?
you
Time
know,
for the rabbit test.
they have them in these stationary testing things.
Yeah, right.
And they actually fire with some kind of cannon large frozen birds into the jet engine to
Why?
see what kind of damage it does.
Why are they frozen?
Maybe they're not frozen, but they look like poultry from the store.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
chickens and turkeys and whatnot. And so
They add rabbits to the list.
they launch them in to see what damage, because they know these things are going to happen. The
Right.
bird strikes are going to
20,000 times a year.
right. So,
20.
but maybe they need to do more.
Wonder if there's ever been a deer strike.
I hope not.
You'd notice that.
my
Yes, you would.
Gosh.
You would notice that. Hey, Caitlin
What?
and Skye, sermon illustration?
I was just going to say.
You
I was
got
just going to say.
anything?
Okay, then you must be ready for one, Caitlin.
No. I was going to ask you for one.
Oh no. I didn't even think that this was coming my way.
Yeah. That's why
I
it's
mean-
fun.
What? You got one?
No. Go ahead.
Check your spiritual tarmac before you fire your Holy Spirit engine.
I was thinking more like
Yeah.
the way evil can suck you in.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
lure you. Then when you get too
Oh.
close.
It's the wanton woman in Proverbs beckoning to you from the side of the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
I know, but take it up with.
I was going to say
Or
it
is it-
could be, it's either like the usual temptations or unusual ones. Either way, it destroys the plane going.
Are we the plane or are we the rabbit?
It could be the expected. We're
Are
the
we
plane.
the engine?
We're the plane. The rabbit or the bird is the like sin that gets you off track. It doesn't matter
Yeah,
if it's the one you
okay.
expect or an unexpected one. Either way,
I think we could go multiple ways here. One
Yeah.
is the rabbit could be like the yeast of the Pharisees. The small little innocent animal
Yeah.
can bring
That's
down
good.
the
Exactly.
whole plane,
Yeah.
right? But then
Yeah.
the other one is, if you are the rabbit, wide is the fan blade that leads to destruction,
Yeah.
right?
I got one.
Oh.
Pulls you in.
I got one.
Oh.
The rabbit represents the tongue that can turn the ship like a rudder and can set it on fire. The words that you speak from your mouth can set your whole body on fire, like a rabbit and a jet engine.
It could also
I like that we need an analogy for the analogy
Right.
that's already in
Why?
scripture.
well, because boats and rudders are very first century. Jet
Yeah.
engines and
And
But
rabbits.
and jet
Modern
engines.
rabbits.
Modern.
What about
You didn't say how much you liked my analogy, my illustration. You did not say that. Why didn't you say anything
Wow, someone's insecure
about
today.
how? I think this is the first time I've done one.
Bill was like,
So
you hate me?
I'm looking for some feedback.
I like it very much, Phil. I think if you wrote that out, I would put it on my refrigerator.
If we illustrated it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be like a Thomas Kincaid style painting of as rabbits through, like, it's harder for a rich man to enter heaven than a rabbit to enter a jet engine
But that's pretty easy.
Oh my
Oh.
gosh.
That's the
successfully
opposite.
and come out the other side.
That's why I said wide is the road that leads to destruction. Wide is the fan blade that leads to, because it's
Yeah,
very
that's good.
easy for a little
that's good too.
rodent to get sucked up into that thing.
All right. Caitlin, last word on our rabbit sermon illustrations.
I think we should just note that this is probably not a danger to anyone.
Are rabbits
nervous-
kosher?
Our sermon illustrations.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is in danger of hearing a sermon with these kinds of illustrations in the near future.
Are rabbits endangered?
No, I said, are
No.
they kosher?
Oh, are they kosher? Do they have a cloven hoof? do they
This
do they
is
swarm in the
crazy.
air, or do they swarm on?
This one did.
Ah!
I don't know. Why? Where are you going with this?
I don't know, because that opens up a whole nother avenue. Because if it's an unclean animal, then
yeah.
it turns into all kinds of
Yeah,
other
yeah.
illustrations.
Oh,
but I don't
boy.
know if
What
rabbits.
fun.
I think rabbits are okay, aren't they?
Okay. Is progressive Christianity in trouble? Two stories. This was such a big story last week. It was picked up both by the New York Times and the Atlantic with big stories. Is progressive does, hang on, I got the wrong thing up. Does the death of Pope Francis signify that progressive Christianity is in trouble? Whither progressive Christians after Pope Francis, says Which one is it? Oh, this is the New York Times.
Elizabeth Diaz and Ruth Graham.
Oh, Ruth.
Yeah.
We like Ruth. For 12 years, Pope Francis was the most powerful Christian on the world stage, using his voice to elevate the poor and the marginalized. Millions of progressive Christians in the United States, Catholics and non-Catholics alike, considered him to be a powerful counterweight to a rising conservative Christian power. He was the magnetic center for their values. His death leaves a question gnawing inside their minds like a rabbit in a jet engine. In a world without Pope Francis, where their values feel particularly vulnerable, where do they go from here?
I think Jesus is a good alternative.
Where do they go?
Oh.
There's nowhere to go, Skye. Bishop Sean Rowe, presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, said, "For those of us who want to embody the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes and the love that Jesus showed in the world, this is now more important than ever." What's this, you ask? He said, this moment. This moment is now more important than this moment has ever been before. I'm not sure what that means. Politics are certainly co-opting Christian language and the Christian story. It is now ours to take that back. Many conservative Christians, including Protestants, viewed Pope Francis skeptically. To them, the Pope was soft on doctrinal matters and risked pushing all of Christendom to surrender its core teachings. Here's a quote from Al Mohler.
I just stopped in my tracks when I read this one.
Quote from Al Mohler, president of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary: "Francis will go down in history as the Pope of liberal gesture, the vicar of equivocation. Just when his church needed a firm hand and intellectual firepower, he responded with a shrug."
Okay. Hello,
Yeah.
Mr. Kettle. Can I introduce you to Mr. Pot?
Are you saying that Al Mohler is a liberal
No.
gesturer?
I'm saying equivocation. If you're accusing this Pope of equivocation and you're Al Mohler on a moral position, hello.
Yeah, because he changed his views on Trump. Is that what you're saying? I'm trying to unpack your statement for those at home saying, I don't know what Skye is saying.
I can't imagine. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, if you think this Pope wasn't firm enough in holding a firm line on something,
he didn't get angry about the things some of us wanted him to be angry about, and he got angry about some things we didn't want him to be angry about. He was not following our lead.
Yeah, but equivocation makes it sound like you're back and forth.
That's true.
And I don't think he was that way.
No, he said a few things that people couldn't figure out exactly what it meant.
He was being ambiguous.
He was ambiguous.
Well, again, we go back to that recent interview that Al Mohler did about his views of Donald Trump. About ambiguous.
They were a little ambiguous.
Yeah,
but this story isn't about Al Mohler.
I know, but it's just interesting. Like he's whatever.
The Atlantic wrote an article with the headline, "Progressive Christianity's Bleak Future." Things are getting bleak. Pope Francis leaves behind a church that is moving away from the faith he championed. In his final Easter address, Pope Francis touched on one of the major themes of his 12-year papacy, that love, hope, and peace are possible amid a rising tide of violence.
Papacy?
His what?
His 12-year papacy.
It's me, papacy. Papacy.
There you, yeah.
Papacy. What a great thirst for death, for killing we witness each day in the many conflicts raging in different parts of the world, he said in his last message. How much contempt is stirred up at times toward the vulnerable, the marginalized, and migrants. He did it. He went there. He said migrants. He mentioned migrants. Skye.
Yeah.
His opponents were mainly conservatives of various stripes, some traditionalists upset by his relative coldness toward the Latin liturgy, some members of the political right frustrated with his unwillingness to spiritually cooperate in their socio-political projects. Thus, some conservatives were positively delighted by Francis's death. Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted, "Today there were major shifts in global leadership. Evil is being defeated by the hand of God." So I think she just said that God killed the Pope.
And that the Pope is evil.
Yeah, so that's cool. So what do we think?
I want Caitlin to go first.
Yeah, Caitlin had some feels. I
think I'm going to 100% agree with Caitlin.
Because Caitlin is really worried about the future of progressive Christianity as laid out by Pope Francis.
Yeah, both of these pieces, and to the credit of the reporters, this is not entirely their fault. I think there could have been some more nuance in the reporting, but a lot of it has to do with just the analysis that they are reporting about from leaders in various Christian denominations. I have a couple of frustrations. My main one is I just think it's disingenuous to say that there is just like conservative Christians as like a monolith that all believe the same things and believe the same politics, et cetera. And then there's just this monolith of progressive Christians that cuts across denominational differences, cuts across political differences, and just sort of believes the same things. And a lot of the quotes they pulled basically were like, there's the bad Christians that are the conservative Christian nationalist types, and then there's us good ones that want to be like Jesus and follow the Sermon on the Mount. And I think it's disingenuous to claim there is a monolith of progressive Christians that kind of can be defined and then studied, but also to say that a lot of the progressive Christians, even some of the ones that are referenced here, like leaders in the Episcopal Church in the US, to say that they were like looking to Pope Francis as a guide for their theology or political activism is nuts. Like they just weren't doing, they could value him as a leader. It's absolutely true that you could say he did really important things in the context he was in. He wrote really important documents of Christian theology that I have drawn on. But to make it sound like they were in agreement totally with him or that they were doing the same things he was doing is just not accurate. There's a ton of different ways of being a conservative Christian or being a progressive Christian. And a lot of the folks that represent publicly progressive Christianity today would and have had very harsh criticisms of Pope Francis.
Yeah.
One, for being from a church that has a pretty hierarchical structure, that has a male-only priesthood, that has very harsh condemnations of birth control and abortion access. Like, they weren't fans of him in totality. And he represents a very different way of thinking about a Christian witness in the political world, thinking about Christian ethics. Skye and I just recorded a whole Getting Schooled about Catholic social teaching and all the things that Pope Francis is inheriting and drawing on as the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. So just to say that there's this like monolith of progressive Christians and ask, is it on the ascendancy or on the decline because of the death of this important leader, I just think is not nuanced enough. It doesn't accurately describe denominational differences, and it doesn't accurately describe how political differences and religious theological differences relate to each other.
Caitlin, I just need you to do something for me. Define progressive Christianity. What is it?
I don't know. I mean, that part of what's frustrating here is what I tend to mean when I say progressive Christianity, when I'm talking to people generally, is a form of Christianity that takes some of its political cues from the political left, as opposed to pretty conservative Christians that take some of their cues from the political right. But even saying that just now, that's kind of some of what the articles are getting at. And it makes me uncomfortable because it can be a helpful shorthand when you're not going to get into all the details, but it doesn't accurately describe what most people on the ground are doing. And really importantly, when it comes to American Protestants who would describe themselves as progressive, they are a world away, theologically and politically, from who Pope Francis was, from who any Catholic Pope could be. And to just mash it all together and say, this is progressive Christianity doesn't do justice to Pope Francis. Yeah. And it doesn't help us accurately understand what's going on with Christian political activism in the U.S., because it makes it sound like within this monolith of progressive Christians, they're following the Sermon on the Mount and just doing what Jesus said, when there's a huge subset of progressive Christians. And I say this with love for many like dear people I work with and am around at the Divinity School at Duke, with people who I'm like good friends with on the internet, who I really think need someone to say, like, you're kind of doing the same thing that conservative Christians are doing, and that you found your political cues from not just the general left, not just from the Democratic Party, but from kind of the far end of the political left. And you have found Christian language to you know, baptize that in the worst form, or even just to kind of coincide with it in the best form. But you're not taking your cues solely from scripture or Christian theology like everyone wants to claim they are. You're taking a lot of your cues from the activists on the political left.
Yeah. It seems to me that both of these articles start with the framework of the current American political moment, and then push the Pope through that framework and decide, because I'm ignoring these things, he's clearly on the left in American politics. And then people on the right are doing the same thing. I'm ignoring these things, the things that I actually agree with that he says or that the church teaches, and I'm just focusing on the things that, you know, we're getting upset about today. Skye?
That's exactly what these articles
Sermon
do.
illustration?
No sermon illustration. But to Caitlin's point, by any measure, theologically, Pope Francis is a conservative. And any cardinal in the Catholic Church these days pretty much is going to be a theological conservative. And what I mean by a theological conservative is somebody who takes the supernatural teachings and doctrines of the faith seriously and affirms the orthodox creeds of the church, like the Nicene Creed. And like, that's a theological conservative. There are Christians, progressive Christians out there who, not all, but some would deny the virgin birth. They would deny the resurrection. They would deny all kinds of the inerrancy of scripture, all that kind of stuff. They would deny that. And you can be a theologically conservative Christian and have either either politically progressive or conservative politics.
And hopefully both.
And depending on the issue.
Right,
Absolutely.
right.
So to your point, Phil, they take Pope Francis and push him through the lens of American political spectrum, conservative or progressive, ignoring his theological conservatism, and then draw conclusions based on that.
Right.
And it's just, it doesn't serve a theologically or religiously ignorant reader.
Yeah.
These articles, because it gives you false categories, and you need to redefine the categories before you explain.
Yeah.
the Pope.
So another way to have approached these two articles would be to say North American Christians who appreciated Pope Francis's tone on immigration and the poor are wondering who will be the next voice to promote those causes that cut against the grain in American Christianity today.
Yeah, but I think
Would that have been a good article?
Yes, and I would have added the reason the Pope said what he said about migrants and the poor was not because he was a progressive.
Right.
Right.
It was because he was a theological conservative
Right.
and took the teachings of Jesus
Right.
seriously.
Well, I just think we need to leave those bucket terms out of the article completely and don't say what's happening to progressive Christianity. Just say what's happening to the church's view on immigration and the poor post Pope Francis.
And part of my frustration with all of this is that sometimes these framings unintentionally seed certain pretty central, pretty historic Christian positions on certain issues to the left. Like, it is a progressive Christian thing to care about the poor. No, it is like one of the earliest, most consistent, most scriptural commands for Christians to care about the poor. Or when it comes to immigration, huge theme throughout scripture, tons of historical evidence of Christians caring about foreigners. So I just get frustrated when it's like, well, these are the progressive Christians. It's like, well, some of the political voices you can put in those buckets, you can put along that spectrum politically, but unintentionally you end up basically telling people the conservatives are the ones that are going back to the original. They're the ones that are sort of like the stodgy old-fashioned ones that aren't willing to change with the times. And it's like, no, so many of the things that Pope Francis cared about that we put in a progressive political camp are not changing with the times. They are staying consistent with Christian teaching and doctrine throughout time.
The other thing that annoyed me, especially about the New York Times article, is they made it sound like Christianity in the West, both Roman Catholics in America and even evangelicals in America, are gaining ground because they're rejecting the teachings of the Sermon on the Mount. And that the progressives are losing ground because they're sticking with the Sermon on the Mount. And that's ignoring a whole lot of other factors that are going on here. Like, yeah. So
But simplicity is easier for us to digest than complexity.
Right. But simple sugars are bad for your health and complex carbohydrates are better for your health.
Like a rabbit through a jet engine. Some things are easier. A bowling ball through a jet engine, that's hard. A rabbit, easy.
Okay.
Dear Lord.
Are you with me? The Zoomers, Generation Z. Are you familiar with Generation Z, Caitlin?
Very.
It's the generation born between 1997 and 2012. When were you born, Caitlin?
1994.
Oh, you're not.
I'm old now.
You're not.
I'm
I know.
old.
You're not a Zoom. You're not a Zoomer. You're not a Zoomer. Zoomers are becoming more religious. This is from Vox. Gen Z is finding religion. Why? That headline is a little misleading if you actually read the article. It's not that Gen Z is finding religion. It's that they appear to be moving away from religion at a much slower rate than every other generation. Over the last 5 years, the share of Americans who are nuns has stabilized at roughly 30%. In other words, the nuns are not growing anymore. And we don't mean Catholic nuns. They're sad because of Pope Francis, but that's not who we're talking about. People with no religious affiliation was growing very dramatically, and it's pretty much stopped now. It's leveled off. Sometime around or after the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, young Americans began to find or at least retain religious belief at higher rates than previous generations. Why? There's no unifying explanation for the trend, but it extends beyond the United States, and that suggests there might be some structural reasons Gen Z is rediscovering faith again or rejecting faith more slowly. Something about post-COVID seems to be bringing youth back to Christianity, but also to religion in general. Okay, so Vox posits 3 reasons the Ute are coming back to the church. You with me?
Mm-hmm.
Sermon illustration?
What, from my cousin Vinny?
From what I did.
The 2 Utes.
The 2 Utes. The 2 Utes have come back to the church.
What's a Ute?
A response to the loneliness epidemic. Is it possible that some members of this generation who do feel isolated or lost might be finding community and friendship in organized religion? So, Zoomers are lonely. They were raised with nothing but phones. They never went outside. They never met other humans. And now they're lonely. And so they're going to church. Okay, that's possibility number 1. Yeah, you buying that, Caitlin? Looks like Caitlin's buying it. I think she's sold on that. On that one. Number 2, this is interesting. This feels like a little bit of a stretch. Is it a response to loss of trust in the establishment? Like, what? I thought that's why we all left the church, because we lost trust in established religion. Religiosity and spirituality becoming less taboo among Gen Z might be a part of a countercultural, counter-status quo, anti-incumbency energy that has swept many Western democracies since the pandemic's outbreak. It might seem odd to think of religion as countercultural, but at least for many of the youngest Americans, growing religious disaffiliation has been the popular narrative and the posturing of their elders. So, my dad's a nun, so I'm going to be a something.
It's like parachute pants. Right? They were a thing.
Yeah.
So everyone got rid of the thing.
Yeah.
And now it's like back again because it wasn't a thing.
Do you know where you shouldn't wear parachute pants? If you're standing by
a jet engine.
By a jet engine.
Yeah, that was the rabbit's problem.
Yeah.
He was doing the hammer dance and got sucked right in.
Mm-hmm. They were almost like wingsuits. You know those wingsuits where you're kind of got webbed legs so you can float.
Like a flying squirrel.
Yeah. Let's just talk about this for a while. Did you ever have parachute pants?
I may have.
Oh, wow.
I may have.
Have any pictures?
Well,
like 3rd or 4th grade? No.
Yeah,
I'm sure there's
we got to dig that up.
3rd or 4th grade?
We're going to ask your
I
mom.
want to see a 3rd or 4th grade Skye picture, even there's not parachute
pants and hair.
Remember the parachute pants with all the zippers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Why? Are those the ones you have?
I don't remember.
Oh, yeah.
I probably split them.
You split your pants?
Frequently.
Okay, back to our story. Caitlin, what do you think of this premise? You are almost a Zoomer, but you're not.
Yeah.
But you're close. So do you think kids are coming back to religion as a form of rebelling against their elders? Is that possible?
Oh, I think some of them are, for sure. I did an event at Duke a few months ago that was, post-election, talking about pluralism and faith questions. And there were quite a few students there who either said something along the lines of like, I went to college and one of the things I wanted to experiment with was religion, because I didn't grow up with any religion. So I just thought like, I'd try some things out. Or some of them who, when they were talking to the religious people at their table, because the tables were set up to have people from different backgrounds, were so intrigued by it because it was something that they hadn't really come from. And I think the article doesn't say this, but I think one of the interesting things that the church should continue to think about is, yes, there's political baggage of like, oh, I associate Christianity perhaps, or evangelicalism, if I know that word, with the far right, with Trumpism, et cetera. But when it comes to like what we often are trying to address, which is like people got hurt in the church and we need to show them this church is better, we're going to have to adjust to like a lot of people not having any of that because they just didn't grow up in that context. It's not like they had parents or grandparents pressuring them to go to church, or they had negative experiences of like hellfire and brimstone at church. They don't have church experiences, which both means I think we should sometimes at some point we're going to have to shift a little bit from doing so much like, we're not like those churches. Don't worry. We'll heal you from this, to like assuming that people don't have that, but also doing more to say, whether it's a high church with a lot of liturgy and structure, or if it's a low church that tries to be really hip and cool, all of that might be unfamiliar to people. And we're going to have to talk in different ways about what we're doing and explain it to people in different ways, because it might not be like, oh, we're not your grandma's church. Grandma didn't go to church, so I have no idea what any of this is about.
I have, this is partly just the uniqueness of my family background, but I have far more experience with people who have zero church background than I have experience with people who have deep hurt church background.
In your family or in your entire life?
Probably in my entire life.
Okay.
I know more people who don't know anything about church or Christianity than I know people who are like burned out on American evangelicalism.
Huh. What are you saying about the staff here at HOLYPOST Media?
I don't have any relationship with any of them, is what I'm saying. No.
Ouch, I thought we were friends,
I'm
Skye.
joking. But to Caitlin's point, that is a large and growing population of people, and they're curious, and what they know about Christianity, they often get through popular media or politics, which creates its own barriers.
Yeah. So at some point, when we get up in front of a crowd and say, raise your hand if you were hurt by purity culture, the response is going to be, well, I don't know what that is.
Right. In fact, there's going to be more people who have been hurt by the opposite of that? The hookup culture.
Impurity culture.
Yes.
That's what they were promoting. Okay. Number 3. What was number 1?
Overcoming loneliness.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Number 2 was rebelling, being countercultural.
It's like when I was a kid, rebelling against your parents was, smoking a cigarette, and now it's I'm going to mass. Yeah. Take that, Mom.
Remember that story we covered, maybe it was a couple of years ago, about women who were starting to wear prayer shawls? Yeah. Young women, like Gen Z women who were wearing prayer shawls.
The trad wife thing.
Because their grandmother wore one and they thought it was beautiful, and they're wondering, is this okay? Am I still a feminist? It's interesting world. Number 3, is it a response or, conversely, a cause? Well, there's 2 very different theses of younger people's rightward political and social shift. There's a sharp gender divide in who is driving the Gen Z religious shift. Young Gen Z men are becoming much more religious, while young women keeping a religious affiliation are shifting to more politically liberal and tolerant faith groups. So it's the gender divide. Have you heard of the gender divide? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a gender divide. Gen Z men are significantly more likely to attend religious services than Gen Z women, a reversal from what was the norm in the U.S. And young women are leaving American churches largely because of political and ideological cross pressures on what these churches teach about gender norms, sexual identity, and gender equality, as well as the roles women are offered in religious institutions. At the same time, the subtle integration of religious traits into the teachings and preachings of some alt-right manosphere-adjacent content creators who have a particular reach with young men might be amplifying this tension. So it's the Jordan Petersons, even Elon Musk saying, I think I'm a cultural Christian. The result is a generation of men finding community and belonging in religion that reinforces their existing political preferences and causes a further rightward lurch. Remember Lurch?
Yeah.
Yeah, from the Addams family. Yeah. Caitlin, Addams family.
No.
Lurch? Nothing?
His cousin Belch?
Oh my God.
That was not true. That was not true, Caitlin.
Okay.
He made that up. Mm-hmm. He made that up. Okay, so these are 3 pretty different.
Yeah, but I think they could actually all be related.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, tell me more. Tell me more, Skye Jitani.
Well, I don't. If I had a magic survey wand, I would want to know. No.
Why not?
I don't know, we could talk to people. Maybe we can get something done. I would really love to know, of these young men who are going back to church or entering church for the first time, how many of them have a father in their home? Or not necessarily in their home, but have a meaningful relationship with their father, stepfather, somebody, some male role model in their life. Because I wonder if the loneliness factor, the isolation that these young men feel, the loss of trust in other established institutions, and then this need for structure, that some of them may actually... Young men are drawn to gangs because it gives them a belonging and a structure and a rule to live by. They're drawn to fraternities because they want that brotherhood, they want that structure. And I think in this case, some young men may well be drawn to the church if it gives them this structure and meaning and purpose and guidance that they're longing for because they're not getting it from more paternal sources in their lives. And it's interesting that young women seem to be leaving the church in a way that we haven't seen before, because like when I was in seminary, we had to read all these books about how hard it is to get men to go to church because church was seen primarily as a nurturing community, an empathetic community, and it wasn't appealing to some men. And now there's this movement towards the church being this structured, rigid,
being sort of a boot camp of ideology.
Right. And I mean, this is an overstatement because every congregation is different, has its own culture and vibe and stuff. But
nope, they're all either progressive or conservative, and they do it all exactly the same. Kaylin?
Well, I just also wonder if it's not so much the shift that Skye just described, but like I've said this before on the show when we've talked about the loneliness epidemic. I don't know if it's cultural. I don't know if it's biological. I have no idea. But it seems to me that women are more likely to create communities for themselves outside of typical structures for that. So we talked about this when it came to declining marriage rates and declining fertility, of just like women who are single, who don't have children, in my experience, tend to still create pretty rich community for themselves. Not always, but I think more often than men. Whereas it seems like men typically need the institutions that have existed to provide that in the past, which was family and church. And so I wonder if part of it is, I do think there's some truth to the kind of, I think still somewhat oversimplified claim that a lot of people are making now, which is that like women have been the backbone of the church, but now in society, they're saying you actually can have leadership. You can have these opportunities. You don't have to just keep the thing running, but not be in front ever. We'll give you opportunities to be in front. I do think that's some of it, but I do also think that it's in response to loneliness. Men in particular right now are going to tradition and something that feels rooted. And women are less likely to do that, in part because they're creating some social structures outside of that. But one thing I was thinking while reading this piece was, there's been so much written about kind of spiritual but not religious folks. Like, yes, some of this change in church attendance or affiliation is about actual church attendance or affiliation. Sometimes it's just about people believe weird stuff again. Like, it's not so crazy for young people, especially Gen Zers, to believe, in magic or to believe in the afterlife or to believe in spiritual, mystical, et cetera things. They do tend to be less interested in an institutional form for those spiritual beliefs. And I do think something the article misses is that, in my experience, and I don't know what data could possibly tell you this, I don't think data can actually describe all of these dynamics perfectly, but in my experience, when people try and create those thick communities around something that is spiritual, but isn't actually bound by any shared belief that is real, like we all actually commit to believing that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, and then that means that there are certain demands placed upon our life. If it's we all just come together and we share our horoscopes and we have crystals, and like you might pull some things from Christianity, I might pull some things from Buddhism, it's so much harder for that to actually be a rich, thick community because there's so little holding it together. So even in Durham, where I live, like there are tons of like on the message board at a local coffee shop, you can see a ton of like, hey, come out with some witchy people, or like come and join this group that does like yoga and talks about different spiritual things. But it doesn't seem like they're flourishing because it doesn't actually have much that kind of binds it together. But women, I think, are just able to kind of at least have some semblance of that works in a way that men tend to turn to these institutional forms.
Yeah. Speaking of belief in life after death, new survey shows that belief in life after death is actually increasing in the United States. Been collecting data since 1973, when about 76% of Americans believed in something beyond this life. By 1990, it was up to 80%, and today is at 82%. So that's wacky. We're believing more in life after death, not less.
I think the continuity with all these stories is we, as a society, are seeing the bankruptcy of secular materialism.
Yeah.
Like we have pushed that worldview to its logical end. And I think more and more people are waking up going, it's not paying off. It's not providing the things that I think I need to have a flourishing life, like a sense of meaning and purpose and a narrative to the universe, including my part within it, even after I'm dead. It doesn't give me a sense of understanding relationships and the role of family and marriage and sexuality, all these things that we were promised. Secularism would free us from the bounds of ridiculous Christianity or religion, and we'd be free to do whatever we want and feel better. And a lot of people are going, no, it's gone to absurdity. Yeah. Right. And I think there are some cultural movements that have now, there's been such a reaction to, some of it not good reaction, but it's reaction nonetheless. And the cool factor is on the reactionary side that's saying maybe we threw the baby out with the bathwater here and we got to get it back.
Yeah. Okay, Caitlin, we're pretty almost out of time, so we don't have. But I want each of you to respond to this, and you can say whatever you wanted to say before you respond to this.
Okay, I'll find a way to make it an answer to what you said.
Yes, thank you, and work in rabbit somewhere.
Okay, cool.
Rabbit. If we have a problem that certain values that have been labeled progressive are losing their champions, Pope Francis, certain values that are labeled conservative are picking up more steam, boys are more attached to church because of structure and authority. Girls are less attached to church because of perceived inequalities and mistreatment. What's the solution? What do we need to do over the next, 10 years? What do we need to do to make a healthy church?
Well,
yeah.
Okay, that's a big question, Phil.
Yeah, I know. I just want you to address that in 30 seconds or less
okay.
before we wrap up the show. What's one thing we can do?
This is actually what I was going to say as an answer to your question, which is that I think the other thing that this data shows us is not just, like Skye said, the ultimate failure of a certain materialist worldview. It's also, there is just a human hunger, not only for there to be more to this life, but for there to be a sense of justice and redemption of things. We just spent all this time talking about, right, these causes that are labeled progressive, but Pope Francis really couldn't fit in that box. He cared about all of these various things because Catholic social teaching cares about all these various things. I would say Scripture tells us God cares about all these various things that don't fit in a political box. And some of them right now feel impossible to be fulfilled. You're looking at what's happening with U.S. immigration policy, or you're looking at the loneliness epidemic, and you're looking at the failure of our society to create communities and structure for people to live full, flourishing lives. You're facing great injustices in our policing. Whatever it is, you're looking at the world and you're just going, this is not how things are supposed to be. And I have such a strong innate sense that not only this is not the way things are supposed to be, which is a little bit of a move towards where do I get that sense? Why do I believe things could be different than that? And a hunger for, tell me that at some point things change. Tell me that at some point wrongs are righted and justice is served and things are made right. And I think the church has a real opportunity here to go, we don't separate out. And we've separated out in various iterations of the church, whether it was seeker-sensitive stuff, whether it is churches that are sort of captive to political ideologies, whatever it is, we have often severed the community that the church is supposed to be with really actually believing the things the church is supposed to believe. And I think we're going to keep looking at these trends and going, well, maybe people need community, but they're not interested in some of the supernatural stuff, so we'll cut that out. Oh, wait, they're into the supernatural stuff. Maybe we'll get really into that, but none of the demands of the church. No, we have real demands of community. We belong to each other, and that asks big things of us. And it asks that we believe kind of crazy things. But I think increasingly that will be appealing to people. I even see that with the Gen Zers that are undergrads at Duke. There are a bunch, I've said this on the show before, but there are a bunch of vaguely progressive-y, mainline churches very close to campus that those students are not going to. They're carpooling to an SBC megachurch across town. And I'm not saying that one is better or worse, but I've heard from the mouths of undergrad students that the reason they're choosing this conservative church is, and I'm almost quoting them here, they seem to really believe this stuff. And I think that really matters. We can't choose one or the other, thick community or really believing this stuff. It turns out really believing this stuff is what makes it possible for us to belong to each other in that kind of sincere way. And belonging to each other helps us believe things that are pretty crazy and hard to believe. And the more that we try and pick one or the other of those to appeal to the shifting sands of our moment, the more we actually won't meet the moment.
The more we're just a rabbit in front of a jet engine.
Just getting squished in the engine.
The winds of culture. That was great. It was also longer than 30 seconds. I'm just going to say it was a little bit longer than 30 seconds. Skye, last word.
I think the lesson is you want to be the jet engine. You don't want to be the rabbit. Right?
So you want to be the culture that sucks people up.
No, I think the difference is Caitlin's totally correct on this, and you see it in Jesus. For too long, the American church, at least the segment of the American church that we three have been a part of, has kind of put its finger to the wind and asked, what do people want? And that led to the seeker-sensitive movement. What do people want? That leads to Christian nationalism and MAGA. What do people want? Well, maybe they want supernaturalism. Maybe they want candles and liturgy now. And they're always asking, what do people want? Rather than going, what is Christ calling us to be in this moment, regardless of what the world thinks of us? Regardless of what politics says or the categories are or how many people are coming or how much offering is in the play, we will be the church that Christ is calling us to be. And if you are just that, some people will despise you. Some people will be drawn to you. And whether you have multitudes following you or just 12, you're okay, because your value and significance is not in how the world responds to you, but it is in following your Lord. And that is innately attractive to people. And we don't do it because it's attractive. We do it because it's right. And that was Pope Francis. He said the things he said and modeled the things he modeled because he believed they were right in following Jesus. And when you start filtering him through the lenses of politics and cultural trends, it just warps his legacy. Yeah. And that's what we need to learn in this moment.
Yeah. Stop warping Pope Francis. Stop it, everyone. That was also longer than 30 seconds, but it was also good. We have 2 upcoming HOLYPOST events in May. Skye will be in Detroit with Tim Alberta. Tim Alberta, that's a big deal. This Saturday, May 3rd. That's coming right up.
Ooh.
And Caitlin will be in the Washington, D.C. area on Friday, May 16th. Ooh. Do we know who the guest is yet? Don't know who the guest is.
Duke Kwan.
Duke Kwan. That's cool. That's cool. I was hoping you were going to say J.D. Vance. Come meet fellow HOLYPOSTers. Get a behind-the-scenes look at upcoming HOLYPOST projects and hear a great conversation between Skye and or Caitlin and their guests. Buy your tickets at holypost.com/events. Okay, go do it right now, right while we're talking. And also sign up for HOLYPOST Plus, because you can learn what Skye and Caitlin are talking about on the next Caitlin getting schooled by a Caitlin Chess, which was about what? It sounded interesting. What was it? The one you just recorded?
Catholic social teaching.
Catholic social teaching. This is Pope Francis, because we don't want to deform Pope Francis's legacy. Okay.
His papacy.
Well, I kind of knew that wasn't right, but I went for it anyway. And we will see you next week. Bye, guys. This episode is sponsored by Minnow. Hey, summer is right around the corner. It's almost time to head to the beach or the pool with your kids. Rather than picking up another set of cheap kids' swimsuits from the local discount store, take a look at Minnow. Minnow makes premium swimwear for kids that you'll love. Timeless designs, great fabrics. Every Minnow suit is thoughtfully designed with comfort, performance, and protection in mind. They're UV blocking for sun protection, easy to put on and take off with just the right amount of stretch. Buttery smooth fabric and quality that'll last through multiple seasons. Plus, coordinating suits for mom and dad so your whole family can look classy together on vacation. Check out Minnow's best sellers, the girls' rash guard one piece, boys' boardies, and unisex rash guard shirts. Elevate your family's style with quality swimwear that will last. Go to shopminnow.com and enter code SHOPMinnow15 at checkout to receive 15% off your first order. That's shopminnow.com, code SHOPMinnow15 for 15% off. This episode is sponsored by Fabric by Gerber Life. Do you remember when your parents sat you down as a kid to talk about the importance of life insurance? Nope, me neither. I didn't think about life insurance growing up, and then suddenly I had kids of my own, and I realized how much they were depending on me to be there for them no matter what. And then I thought, jeepers, I should probably get some life insurance. But how? You need to know about Fabric by Gerber Life. Term life insurance you can get done right here, right now. You could be covered from your couch in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. Fabric has flexible policies that fit your family and your budget, like $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/holypost. That's meetfabric.com/holypost. MEET fabric.com/holypost. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
John Kasich served in Congress and became the 69th governor of Ohio in 2011. He gained national attention in 2016 when he ran for the Republican presidential nomination. Of course, he lost that bid to Donald Trump, but that didn't end his commitment to public service. As the Republican Party abandoned many of its values to follow Trump, Governor Kasich has maintained his belief in pluralism, unity, empathy, and decency. He's also been outspoken about his Christian faith and the role of religion in America's public life. His new book is called Heaven Help Us: How Faith Communities Inspire Hope, Strengthen Neighborhoods, and Build the Future. At a time when trust in many of America's institutions has been declining, including its religious institutions, Governor Kasich's book is a reminder that many of these institutions and the faithful women and men leading them are essential instruments of God's love in the world. Each chapter highlights the story of a different leader of faith and how they've assembled a community or institution to bring positive change to some of the most pressing problems in our world. As you'll hear in the interview, Governor Kasich genuinely believes the current negativity and selfishness that marks our cultural discourse is about to change, and that people of faith are the ones leading that effort. I think John Kasich is one of them. For our HOLYPOST Plus subscribers, I've got good news. We have a free chapter from Heaven Help Us available exclusively for you. And if you're not yet a HOLYPOST Plus member and would like to learn how you can sign up, go to holypost.com. Here is my conversation with Governor John Kasich. Governor Kasich, welcome to the Holy Post.
Glad to be with you, of course.
Delighted for your new book. It was really inspiring, and it was an enjoyable read in times that it seems like we're always so saturated in negativity. So I encourage folks to pick it up for that reason. A number of the stories that you tell in this book start with unexpected tragedies, whether it's the 2015 shooting at Emmanuel AMC in Charleston, Hurricane Ian in Florida. The founder of Convoy of Hope, Hal Donaldson, talks about his story. And you mentioned your own faith story in this book. I know you've written about it elsewhere, but I wonder if we could start with that. And what is it that kind of brought you back into your faith in a significant way? And how does that intersect with some of the stories you're telling in this book?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, I was, as a young man, I was very engaged in the church. I was a Catholic, altar boy, commentator, all those things. And, and I felt a connection, but I'm not sure exactly what the connection was, but I felt like I had a connection to the big guy. And, but I went to college, and like a lot of college students, drifted away and then got involved in a career in public life. And I was just, driving around at 100 miles an hour. Things were going well. I was, very successful. And then there was a tragedy where my parents were killed by a drunk driver. And it, to say it knocked me off my feet would be an understatement. It basically, Skye, it basically was devastating to me. And at one point, I just didn't know I was going to survive the grief I had. But at that point, I had a couple people approach me, one to help me try to get my life in order, and secondly, to explore my eternal destiny and my relationship with God. And my friend told me, he said, there's a window of opportunity you can go through and try to search all these things, which I then have been doing for 37 years. And my first faith book was called Every Other Monday. This one, I basically wrote this one because I wanted the institutions to be recognized as something of great value and critical to our country. And that if people can focus more on what they can do through these institutions on any variety of issues, from homelessness to human trafficking to poverty to literacy, that it gives people an opportunity to find their passion. And being in an institution surrounded by people who will give them psychological and some material support for their hopes and their dreams.
Was that critical in your own journey, the role of institutions, or was it more?
No, not really. It was, I started going to a Bible study I didn't even want to have any interest in the Bible study until the accident. And then I started going to the Bible study. And then one of my friends said, well, if you're doing this in Washington, why can't you do it in Ohio? So I started a little study here, and it exists to this day. We meet every other Monday. It's existed for almost 40 years. We've had people who have been in it who have died, and so we've been replacing them with younger people, and it still keeps going, and it's trying to use the scripture to talk about, our path and, what is important, those kinds of things. So it's kind of a life study in a way. And, it kind of carries on. And I just feel that these institutions can be of great help to people, because if you try to do everything alone, it's harder. If you do it with a group, it's amazing what you can accomplish. But my journey was really studying and questioning and wondering if any of this was true. And at some point, you got to lay your chips down on red or black or something and decide, where you're going. And I didn't do it on the basis of, a rabbit's foot or, this is an easy way out or whatever. I just spent a lot of time trying to get questions answered, which I do to this very day.
Yeah, they don't stop. I noticed you opened the book with a quote from Dallas Willard: "The first act of love is always the giving of attention." Dallas was a massive influence on me. I'm curious if you started with a quote from him because he had some influence on your journey, or why Dallas?
Well, I met on a kind of a freak accident. I met John Ortberg, who Dallas Willard referred to as the greatest preacher that he had ever heard, believe it or not. And I believe it. And John is talented. And I went to visit John Ortberg on a kind of a freak meeting, and he gave me a pamphlet that talked about the new creation, which I didn't really know anything about. I think most churches don't talk about it, but the new creation of the joining of the heavens and the earth and resurrection bodies and being able to carry out God's purpose in the new creation was very hopeful to me. And I called Ortberg and said, "Do you believe this?" And he said he did. And I tracked down Dallas Willard and had a long telephone relationship with him. I never met the man, but we talked a lot about things. And of course, some of his books are just amazing books. And so I'm a Dallas Willard fan, and I know a lot of the people I hang out with, Tremper Longman, Gail Beebe, those kinds of folks. They all know Dallas, and it was a really interesting thing. And a new creation. I was talking to a pastor the other day about why is it we don't hear much about the new creation. He said, "Well, in my church we do, but most places they either don't know about it or don't talk about it, or I don't know what it is. But to me, it's an awful lot of hope." And as I tell people, or I suggest to people who are going through deep tragedies, the storms of life, which we all do, if you hang on and keep your faith, frankly, the rewards will come. And rewards is a tricky thing, because sometimes people say, "Well, we're doing it for a reward." No, the reward is inherent in your approach to the storms of life.
Amen. That comes out loud and clear throughout the stories you tell in this book. These people who are doing amazing works and the communities that are doing these amazing works are clearly not doing them because they think it's not some kind of prosperity gospel grift.
No, they don't even know that any of it's going to work. I mean,
Right.
It's like this lady who has an autistic son, and she needed to build some group homes, and she went to her church and other churches, and they all worked together and got it done. If there was a need in that case, with Convoy of Hope and Hal Donaldson, that story is so ridiculously amazing.
Yeah.
That people could read it and say, "Well, I'm not good enough to do anything." I can't compare to that. And then there's Tony Chris, who's in the literacy world, and that's something we can all do. So we need to make it easy. I always like to say my wife has a mission. She doesn't call it that, but I do. And that is, she has a group she visits. She calls her olds. And these are people who are older and are lonely, and she goes to spend a little time with them every couple of weeks, and they love it, and she loves it. And she said it's a little frustrating because all of her olds end up leaving.
Well, Governor, here's the thing that caught me off guard about your book. This book is really, as you said earlier, it's a celebration of institutions and the value of institutions. Right. But you're putting this out at a time when it feels like institutions are really under attack. You've seen the stats. Americans trust institutions less than ever before.
Yeah.
We have a current administration and the DOJ stuff that's going on that's dismantling a lot of institutions. And you obviously come out of Republican politics. And Republicans historically have been critical of
overregulation,
but
come out of American politics more. The Republican Party was my vehicle and never my master. So we can be clear.
I agree. I remember your campaign in 2016. I felt that way, which is why, if I can confess something, I did vote for you.
Good. I like you more, Skye. Sky's the limit.
There you go.
Okay.
But here's my question. Like there is this spirit of anti-institutionalism right now. There is this, let's cut because everything is out. How do you balance the need for institutions, which you clearly value in this book, without over-indexing on institutions in a way that takes away from autonomy and the role of the individual, which is also part of our American heritage?
Well, I think that the Judeo and Christian ethic is a part of our culture and value system in this country. And the individual's critical, and we're not taking the individual out of the institution. The individual's kind of got the fire, and what the institution does is to support the individual with, it's sort of like if you want to go into politics, you need a campaign club, you need somewhere to go, right? To organize. And that's really what this is. And what the institution can do is to tell you, keep going. Yeah, I want to help you. I want to get this done. And it's done it's what Jesus would want. He would want us to engage, and the institution should be important. And let me just say to you also, Skye, I thought that people would be done with politics by now. I really did. I thought that after the election, people would want to take a break.
Yeah.
But they don't. They're as polarized and in their silos as much as they've been. And so part of my message is let's get over that. And maybe I'm a little too soon. Maybe I'm a little too early. Maybe if I'd have written a book highly critical of some political figure, it would be doing better than a book that says we should have hope. But I have no regrets, and I think it's great. And I think this book has a long life. I think people will find it, and I think it can make a difference. So I don't worry about too much, Skye. I have mostly always walked, sort of a lonely road, only to be followed later by people, and many of whom don't remember how I started, or they've passed it on to somebody else. But that's okay. I'm just doing my job. But I am shocked that people are still got their boxing gloves on.
Yeah, I guess it's reinforced in our media a lot, and people pick their corners. They get caught in their social media algorithms that get them stirred up. But you offer kind of a balm to that in this, because you tell story after story of people coming together across differences to accomplish good things. The echo it reminded me of is George H.W. Bush in his 88 campaign, I think it was. I mean, this is my childhood.
The points of light.
Exactly, 1,000 points of light, where he was trying to really encourage and validate the work of ordinary Americans in their communities. And you've certainly picked that up in this book.
Skye, here's the thing. Remember, all change comes from the bottom up. We spend so much time focusing on these big shots, right? Now, let me ask you a question. If the Secretary of State and your trash man went on vacation, who would you miss more? And let me also say, when you take a look at the big changes in our society, starting with the social gospel movement, which turned us from an I society, the Gilded Age, into a we society, and brought about a lot of really good changes. The changes came from the bottom up. Martin Luther King, bottom up. So what I say is, if you want to go protest, like I'm walking in here at Otterbein University today, and kids have used the sidewalks to write a lot of messages on with chalk, and a lot of different messages about what to respect and what to hope for. I kind of really like that, because at the end, it's what we do where we live. You could be a protester all day long, but what are you going to do tomorrow? I mean, there's a limit to how many times you can protest. So why don't you go do something after you're done protesting? Or if you think everything's great, in Washington or whatever, I don't know who, then what are you going to do tomorrow? So I think the idea of knitting communities together, I've always believed bottom up. This is just simple to me. And I don't think we have to worry about many of these institutions. They're going to survive, by the way.
Toward that end, as I was reading the book and I'm hearing about these different institutions and the good they're doing, I had to wonder, because I know you've probably finished writing this book before the current administration started, have the cuts in different programs, USAID, have they affected any of the folks that you interviewed or the programs that you profile that you're aware of?
I don't think most of them are dependent on federal dollars. They're just, working with their church. Every once in a while, I'll have somebody tell me how they were impacted or affected. But with those people, I can't think of any that have said. I'm sure that Sister Mary in Philadelphia would say she's been affected. But the book was done before all this came. Mm-hmm. Would it have really changed anything for me? No, I don't think so. Because, what I was trying to do is to say that faith is a good thing, believe in it. You think that being a believer is all about judgment and who you are and all that. I said, it's love God and love your neighbor. And so before you start thinking, I don't want anything to do with it, go check it out. And you will see that great things can come from it. Not from every place, but from many places. I mean, you were a pastor. You know what it's like in there.
Yeah. And you mentioned in one of the stories, I think it's the same story about Hal Donaldson from Convoy of Hope. When he was a young man, he was interviewing Mother Teresa, who just laid down this amazing challenge. It's a little bit what you were saying about the students out there, protesting, right? Like, what are you actually going to do? She said to him, what are you doing to help the poor? And he didn't have an answer. Do you see that as sort of your role these days as a senior statesman, as a former governor, somebody who can step into the cultural conversation and challenge people? Like, what are you actually doing? Is that part of the message of this book?
Well, it's a really good question. I mean, I think I challenge people in the book to say, what the heck are you doing? And, people who pursue their purpose, they find their passion, they have a much more meaningful life. And if people find their passion in a group, whether they're Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative, after they're through pushing the car out of the snowbank, getting it out of there together, they don't sit around saying, well, who did you vote for? They then go have a beer and they chuckle and laugh, and then maybe they talk about their politics, I guess what I'm trying to say is do what you can do because it matters. And I also like to think that, when you're given stuff, you've got to use it. You can't just go through life and, just play golf, That's a horrible thought when I think about it. That's like Twilight Zone, being trapped in hell. All you do is play golf all day, hoping that tomorrow will be better, and it never gets any better. You got to use your gifts, and that's what I'm trying to say. And the other thing that I really like about it is there's stuff about mosques, there's stuff about synagogues, and about churches. And people say, well, why that? I said, I think God's big enough to take care of himself. If they're Abrahamic believers, good. God bless them. Let's talk. Let's get along. So it's designed to give people some renewed faith in the institution, to realize it's a critical part of our society, that it can be a way for transforming many of the problems that we have in our country that we're affected by every day, instead of spending our time figuring out what the heck the president's doing.
On that topic of interfaith cooperation, it's a topic that I've engaged in over the years, given the diversity of my own family background. You have these great stories, like you mentioned, of different congregations working together for common good causes. There's a movement in this country, and we talk about it all the time on our show, of Christian nationalism, the sense that if you're really an American, you have to be a Christian. And it's anti...
Well, I don't accept that.
I know you don't. I know you don't. And the book makes that totally clear. What do you think we need to do in our political discourse, in our corporate discourse as a country, in order to get past that segmentation, that us versus them, the demonization of religious minority groups? We're not hearing that from our politicians and political leaders right now. We're getting the opposite, which is more division and atomization.
Well, that's been a big disappointment, Skye, is that, when you go into politics, you should be in politics to do something, to bring about change, to make people's lives better. But if all you're doing is doing rote work and just being loyal to your party and the philosophy of your party, which could change any day, and we see it happening, then you're kind of wasting your time. I don't understand why you would do that. I mean, I was raising Cain from the day I went in. I worked with people. I didn't care who they were. If we had a common purpose, we'd work together. And that's kind of the way I look at how society ought to work. I don't have to agree with you to be your friend. Here's a radical notion, right? Here's a radical thing. I haven't heard this for a long time. I don't agree with you, but I like you. Or, you know what? That's a really good point. Maybe I should think about that. Maybe you're right and I'm not. Could you imagine hearing that? They're going to put that in the Smithsonian so people can go and hear that through some sort of technology that takes us back to the old days when we actually liked one another. Look, I think, Skye, that everything's a pendulum. At some point, this thing will change, and I think the institutions will be there to block crazy stuff, and I think people will figure out how to get along again. But it's going to take sort of a spiritual movement. So I'm going to be interviewed about the Pope today, and the Pope's effect on American politics. Okay. I don't know that it's going to have any great effect, but here's what I wonder. Are these all sparks that can allow us to create something like we saw at the beginning of the 20th century? And that's some sort of a revival that is positive, that is not judgmental, that is rooted in Scripture. And maybe that's what the Pope can be. And people are watching this closely, as you know. And they're divided within the Catholic Church about who he was and everything. But the spark of caring is there. And that's what we need. We need to realize that we're all made in the image of God. And remember that whole thing, was it I can't remember which part of the Scripture. Help me out here. You're the pastor. When you were hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was in jail, you never visited me. When I didn't have any clothes, you never helped me.
Matthew 25.
That? What is it?
Matthew 25.
Matthew 25. And isn't that the nub of it? And by the way, in case people don't realize, I know they know this, but they really don't know it. We're all going to die someday. I mean, we talk about that theoretically, right? We say, oh, I know I'm going to die, but you really don't think you're going to. And then for many people, at the end, we're going to be held accountable for how we treated people here. And look, I'm a knucklehead. I don't always take the time. I'm not always the best or the most pleasant, but I know I can do better.
You wrote a previous book about how courage is contagious.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a value I keep coming back to in this season, because frankly, I've gotten annoyed and upset at some of my colleagues in ministry who I think lack courage because they fail to recognize that, you're going to die one day and you have to give an account. And they're more worried about losing members or losing donors or losing some platform. And I wonder if that lack of courage, both from our political leaders in some cases, our religious leaders in other cases, is why we're kind of in this mess. Your book does such a beautiful job of showing how people cooperate across divisions on local issues, whether it's homelessness or caring for autistic adults or whatever the topic was of each chapter. Like, we do that in our local communities, but for some reason, as you scale up, it all just breaks down.
Skye, I'm really enjoying this. You could tell, right? This is a good conversation. Look,
I am too.
You just pointed something out that I've tried to point out. People say, those politicians, they can't stand up. They don't have any courage. Why aren't we hearing from them? You just talked about the pastor. I can't lose my donor. I can't lose my people, okay? In business, they got to go down in a flock down to visit the king, or I'd say the king, the president. Excuse me, that was not appropriate. Go down to visit the president, no matter who the president is, to say, I need help because I might hurt, my business might get hurt. It's like in the entertainment business. How many seats did you fill? How many albums did you sell? All those kinds of things. What we find in our society today, it's almost like the last gasp of air, right? You and I are in a rocket ship and I got the last one. That's the I culture we live in.
Yeah.
As pointed out by Robert Putnam in the book called The Upswing. And I believe that this will be righted. I think that people will begin to say there's more to life than money, power and influence. It's just we go through these cycles. And I don't begrudge a businessman visiting a regulator and saying, look at what you're doing to my business. But at the same time, what's the limit to what you're willing to give up in order to get what you want? You know, where is the limit for a pastor who says, if I lose half of my congregation, does that mean I'm a failure? You know, maybe not. Maybe it makes you a better pastor or better preacher, whatever. I mean, and this is easy to say, hard to do.
Right.
But where are we going, Skye? I mean, you know, remember, who was it that said, when Jesus, I guess, said to Peter, you know, go. He said, well, where do you think I'm going to go? Where am I going to go to if I'm not hanging out with you?
Right.
So at the end of our lives, we're going to go back and assess how did we do. And we're all idiots, right? We're all hypocrites, all of us. But some will be less than others. And I think those that study the great religions, and I'm going to put Islam in there as well, we kind of know what the compass says. We kind of know what we're supposed to do. We don't do it because we are drawn by the magnet of this world, not the values of the world yet to come.
To go back to Dallas Willard, I had a conversation with him at one point where he...
And then I want to be clear about one thing that I said here.
Yeah.
When I mentioned the word king, I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about anybody that has power. You know, where people will go and try to get what they want. And understand that. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's what line do you cross to get what you want?
Exactly. Dallas Willard said to me that one of the problems that we have in the American church is that what we're fixated on is what he referred to as the ABCs: attendance, buildings, and cash. And he said, if that's what we're measuring, if that's our definition of success as a ministry leader, then we're going to continue to get the outcomes we've been seeing. But until we change that, we look for other fruit, measure something differently. That's what's got us in this trap. And I suppose the same thing goes in political leadership or business leadership. If it just comes down to bottom line or votes or offices or influence, and we don't see something greater, we're not going to sacrifice. We're not going to take the risk to be courageous and say what needs to be said.
Well, Michael Novak, the great Catholic theologian, said that if the free enterprise system does not have a foundation of value and meaning, it's bankrupt. And I think that's true in anything. And here I am preaching this stuff. And again, I want to reiterate, I'm an idiot and a hypocrite. Okay, I do stupid things all the time. Just ask my wife. But man, I'm upset when I do it wrong, and I want to make it right whenever anybody points it out to me, you know, like my buddies or my family. You know what I mean?
So before we wrap up, Governor, I mean, you've put this book out, which is obviously part of your effort to champion these ideas. Beyond the book, any ideas of how you may institutionally participate in advancing these things? I mean, you've had a platform before. I mean, you're still in the media, but you've had a platform in government, both in Ohio and nationally.
Yeah.
Do you see other institutional outlets for you to carry that message forward?
Well, I do it in business. I do it in the media. You know, I think the media people know. I remember telling Roger Ailes when I was working at Fox News, I said, you know, I'm not a Bush sycophant. He said, yeah, we noticed. I mean, they never tried to change me. I work at MSNBC. I'm an independent voice there. I do it, you know, what I call it like I see it in the media. I'm a businessman now. I do it in business. And, you know, look, I got to say, I want to put myself up on a pedestal because I'll get knocked right off of it. But I try to do this basically and be a center of something. I got this from my mother. My mother had no fear. My mother was like, she was hell on wheels when it came to pointing things out. And I think that's where I get it from. And I'm glad for what my mother taught me and what she represented, along with my father. And I'm just going to keep on going. And in this book, you know, I think this book, I hope, is going to be around for a long time. There'll be other opportunities. But when people know me, Skye, they kind of know that this faith stuff is important to me. They kind of, I think somebody once said, well, you're a politician. How can you write a book like this? And I think there are a lot of people, you tell me, I mean, did you have a sense that I was kind of a guy that was with faith?
I did. That's part of what inspired me.
See, and I don't know why. I don't know where you picked it up, but I can't figure that out, but I just do the best I can, my friend, and I don't know where I'm headed. I know one thing that I really believe strongly about, and that is we have to help those who need help. Whether they have behavioral health problems, whether they have physical problems, whether we have to help people like that. We have to help people who live in the shadows. And that's always going to be a passion of mine.
Well, gosh, there's so much I could go on and on about here, Governor. But
hey, we haven't even mentioned the book. It's called Heaven Help Us. Come on, Skye.
I will do a whole blurb about your book at the beginning of this interview. Don't worry about that. I mean, we'll make sure our audience knows how to get it.
This was fun, though, wasn't it? This was fun.
It was fantastic.
I hope you enjoyed this.
I do. I thoroughly enjoy it. I'm happy to finally have met you. And one of the things I appreciate is you are using your platform and this book to highlight the stories of other faithful people. And we just need more of that. I think we live in such an egocentric moment where it's all about, big personalities trying to get more and more of the limelight. So for you to use your platform to highlight the amazing stories of a lot of these people profiled in the book, I think is just a model
Skye,
of what it means.
I'm puny when you compare me to two people who I want to just point out. One's name is Bobby Shriver. He comes from the famous Shriver family, the older brother of Maria, and my friend Bono.
Yeah, you mentioned them in the book, right?
The two of them work together to change the world. When Bono sings, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, he's not talking about his iPad or his car keys. He is a man of faith, and he uses that dramatically to try to communicate a message, sometimes subtly, sometimes more directly, both of them, and therefore standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And I admire that greatly in them. And there are many people like that. So we don't want to say none of them are any good, because there's a lot of people out there who are doing their best to try to shine a light on the best path forward for our culture, our society, and our people.
And I'm grateful that you're one of them. And if folks listening to this are looking for a reason to have hope in humanity in our country again, pick up Heaven Help Us. The subtitle is How Faith Communities Inspire Hope, Strengthen Neighborhoods, and Build the Future. Governor Kasich, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Skye. It's great to be talking to you, and I hope I'll do it again and see you in person.
I do too.
The Holy Post podcast is a production of Holy Post Media, produced by Mike Strelo, editing by Seth Gorvet. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by subscribing to Holy Post Plus at holypost.com/plus. Also, be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary, plus ukulele and occasional butt news. Visit holypost.com for show notes, news stories, Holy Post merchandise, and much, much more.